Bulls Gold is delivered to you via the Barroom Network, now in its 7th year of providing podcasts about Chicago sports, movies, and more. Make sure to subscribe to the Barroom Network for free and easy downloads of its programming, and visit its merchandising store at deepdishtees.com to purchase t-shirts, hoodies, and mugs. Now, on with the show.
Welcome to Bulls Gold on the Barroom Network. I'm Salim Sitterwalla, and as always, I'm joined by Edward Trillo Jr. Ed, how are you doing this fine Saturday evening or Sunday evening? Saturday.
Yeah,
I don't know why
Sunday.
Saturday.
No, I'm doing really well. We were just talking about the Bears and the Bulls Raptors game that just ended with the Raptors getting a 9-point win over the Bulls with how Zach LaVine playing. But overall, no, I've been really good, man. It's been some pretty entertaining Bulls basketball this week. Some ups, a little bit of downs, but I can't really complain. How about you?
Yeah, not too bad. I was watching like 3/4 of that. I would say a little short of 3/4 of that Bulls Raptors game, and that Raptors team, man, even without Siakam, they're a nightmare matchup. They just have a bunch of 6'9", long arm, long leg, athletic dudes that this are like, I said, like there's so many positions, and Scotty Barnes is just continuing to get better. You and I were actually talking about it, like Masai, like he's got a science down as far as this drafting he does, because you look at all these guys, like he finds, like even like Koloko, he was a second round pick, like.
Yeah,
this absolutely insane scouting and this development, and just and I think we've had conversations in the past about how AK is essentially AK and Mark Eversley, and obviously Mark Eversley spent time with Masai in Toronto, but they're basically mimicking what they're doing up there in Toronto.
Yeah, this is where the league is going. It's a lot of 6'7", 6'8", 6'9" guys who are interchangeable between positions, and Toronto has been really good at scouting these guys and just finding them wherever they can find them. Second round, undrafted, just getting them through trade. Even in Orlando, I mean, you look at what Orlando has been doing with their starting lineup. They're starting like 4 guys who are like 6'9" or taller right now with Wagner, Banchero, Wendell, Ball. Like it's really remarkable what's going on in the league right now, and the Bulls definitely are. Hopefully they can get there at some point as they continue to draft some of these guys. But props to Toronto. I mean, they came out without Siakam, and of course the Bulls didn't have Zach LaVine as well, but they came out and got a really good W tonight. Yeah,
no doubt. Toronto, tough matchup for sure for anyone, and obviously Bulls were without Zach, like you mentioned, but obviously they were without Siakam, so it kind of almost. I mean, the Bulls also missing Drummond. They sorely are missing him because of the rebounding aspect. The Bulls last season, we've talked about so much, they lacked rebounding with Vooch off the floor, but in general, a lot to get into as far as the various things about the team as a whole. And one thing I always like to do on our episodes, like one of my favorite episodes, is try to get out of our Bulls bubble comfort zone and bring out an outside perspective. And one of the best people on NBA Twitter, one of the best NBA analysts out there right now, a great basketball mind. He covers the NBA for SB Nation. I call him the young GOAT. His name is Matt Issa. Matt, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
How you guys doing, man? It's really cool to be on a podcast. I feel like I haven't talked on a podcast in a little while. I just do a lot of writing, so it's very solitary, not too much back and forth exchange. just, me pressing buttons, wondering if the words I'm writing make sense. But yeah, I'm happy. This is we were just talking about it. Love, one of my favorite teams. As an analyst, you try really hard, especially when you're coming to the league at large, to remove fandom from things. But like, it's really hard not to just appreciate this team.
Right.
They're fun, just the vibes. Chicago, who doesn't love Chicago?
Man,
No,
I love that.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I love
No,
the
yeah,
attitude.
that's a great attitude. And to let's go off of that right away, because a lot of the offseason, there was a lot of negative general discourse around the Bulls. And granted, like, they didn't have a really strong offseason in the sense that potentially compared to the other teams that are in the East, they didn't maybe make as strong offseason moves. They mostly added depth, or only really added depth with guys like Drummond and Dragic, and a guy like Dragic has been over expectations as far as what he's provided so far this season. I think Drummond's giving us exactly what I think a lot of Bulls fans thought he would give us. But like I said, yeah, not major moves, but the general discourse still was like all anyone was talking about is like worst case scenarios for the Bulls. Every team has, various scenarios that could play out. There's the positive scenarios that could happen, and then you see the development and the team taking a step forward, and then people talk about the worst case scenarios. But I just felt like, and a lot of Bulls fans felt like everyone, all the NBA analysts and nationally, just kept talking about the Bulls as if there's no positive notes to look at. Everything is bad. And this team is just going to barely be the play-in, and that's that. What were your thoughts about that? Like, when you saw a lot of that discourse happening, what were you taking away from it?
Yeah, and so I'm sure both of you, all three of us, we love the NBA. We follow it a lot more than the layman. And so in our outside of NBA Twitter friend groups, we're like the guy that our friends go to with the random basketball questions. You become this just never ending take machine. And so, I was just telling us before the show, my buddy, shout out to him. He just started his schooling at Midwestern University. He was right outside of Chicago. So he's moving to Chicago and he becomes a Bulls fan. He's like, so Matt, what do I expect this season? He's a pretty big NBA fan, but of course he isn't working the league or covering the league or whatever. So he likes to ask me about these things. Right. And I was just like my thing is, and then I named 8 teams. I'm like, can you say, and I might as well name them, Milwaukee, Boston, in no order, Milwaukee, Boston, Toronto, Philly, Atlanta. I'm blanking here. Somebody's going to have to help me. Atlanta, what are Charlotte. No, not Charlotte. No, I wouldn't say Charlotte's in that bubble. I'm trying to think. What was I? So I'm at 6 here.
Philly, Miami,
New York,
Miami. There we go. Miami 7, and then the 8th was somebody was in the playoffs. But regardless, there was 8. I'm pretty sure I had 8. You know what? This is gonna kill me. This is a bad podcast. Cleveland. There we go. It's Cleveland. It's Cleveland. How could I forget Cleveland? Because Cleveland's probably better than all of them right now.
Right,
but so I had those 8. I listed those 8 teams for it. I'm like, not saying that there's no way Chicago would finish above them in the standings, right? But can you definitively say with confidence that Chicago is better than one of those 8 teams? And at the time, it was hard to argue yes. And that was really where I was with the Bulls offseason. So now, in terms of the moves, like you said, they added a lot of what I'll call relief pitchers, when you get into a playoff series. I think the Clippers 2 seasons ago, their postseason's the perfect example of this, where in the first round, their certain bench guys are a little bit more meaningful. They rely more on a Pat Beverly or their guards. And so let's look at Pat Beverly. He's the perfect example on the Clippers team, right? First round, he's very useful. His nasty point of attack defense, how aggressive he can get at times. Second round, he kind of becomes unplayable because Donovan Mitchell's just too fast for this guy. Third round, in Phoenix, he does a really good job at matching Devin Booker's kind of footwork and all that stuff, getting in his face, annoying him, making it hard for spots. The reason I bring up Patrick Beverly, I think of him as a relief pitcher. Not saying you can't be like a starter. He is a starter on an NBA team right now, but like that's the Bulls added. They added these guys where in certain matchups in a playoff series, they could be pretty useful. And Andre Drummond, Goran Dragic, and I think they have a lot of those guys. They have like, I love Derek Jones Jr. I think he offers a lot of versatility. I love Dosunmu. Right now, I'd still say he's like more in that relief guy role where he's not. I call you a relief pitcher if it's like you're not guaranteed to play like 30, 35 minutes every postseason series. Like I feel like there's certain matchups at this point where Io's like, you probably don't want to play him as much. I don't know if you guys agree with me there. I know Chicago people love Io. Probably shouldn't have named him first out of all the players, but you guys get my point.
Yeah,
Chicago has like a bunch of guys on the bench, like Javonte Green. I think he's another good example. So that's what my first thought of their postseason is basically like they added a bunch of relief guys. So they have like a lot of different ways they can go. But I want to get into the one problem with that once I give you guys some time to get into your thoughts.
No, yeah, well, the Io thing. So yeah, last season obviously he doesn't have a lot of playoff experience, and he kind of showed like the playoffs is a different animal. He just wasn't ready to be the same player that he was throughout the regular season into the playoffs. And for sure, I think a guy like Io who's taken a step forward in his game and his development, he does have to show that he can do it throughout a long season, which I think he can. Not to say that he can't, but obviously you have to prove it. You have to prove it, and then you have to prove it again in the playoffs as well that you can perform the same way and when those big minutes count. So yeah, no doubt about that. Before anyone that's listening jumps on you about disrespecting the son of Chicago.
No, I used the wrong example, but you guys get the point.
I get what you mean. 100%.
Yeah,
I think you're right.
Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I think you're right though, and I think this offseason for Bulls fans is really just it's a continuation of so many issues that they've had in the past, because the team has always had these moments where it feels like they're close to something, like they're close to contention, or maybe they're close to having this ideal lineup, and then it feels like they cheapen out. Like I can think of so many times, like you think back to in, was it 06, 07, when we had Dan, Gordon, Heinrich, Noach, all those guys, and we needed that 20 and 10 big man, and Pau Gasol was the guy that everyone wanted, and they didn't want to pay the luxury tax to execute that trade. You think of like 2011, 12, I think it was, when they needed that shooting guard and all they could get was Rip Hamilton, and there's so many different moments where it just feels like they come close to having this ideal outcome, and they cheapen out, or they just get something that is not as desirable. And I think this offseason kind of was just a reminder of that, in the sense that, Dragic and Drummond, they aren't bad players by any means, but it's just, I think people had other outcomes in mind, like significant additions in mind that could make the team better, even though Dragic and Drummond to this point have been really solid. But I think that's where it stems from.
Yeah, and from obviously before, when you cover the league at large, you can't get the minutia of all 30 teams. Like I watch a good bit of Bulls. I've been watching some to talk to you guys in an educated way, but I do also rely on you guys. I rely on the other Chicago Bulls analysts to kind of give me the extra context. And from what I understand, you guys are kind of upset with ownerships. We're going to call it frugality.
That's the ongoing relationship in Chicago with the Reinsdorfs. That's like a historically before before even you were born, Matt. This team before even that, this team has always been one way or another find a way to be cheap. You watched The Last Dance, right? Know the infamous line by Jerry Reinsdorf saying he was going to regret paying Michael fucking Jordan that large contract. The greatest, who many consider the greatest player ever. He said that about that game. So you kind of get the idea. Throughout the history, Reinsdorf has always kind of put a blockade on spending, and how any GM can really maximize the team without going over that, especially in the luxury tax era, going over the luxury tax. So they always have to like find ways around it. Now they always say, if this is a contender, we'll pay for the contender, but it doesn't work that way, right? You have to pay to get there. You can't just be like, well, once we're there, we'll pay. That's hard to come by, not unless you are gifted with a generational talent.
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like right now the most recent example you guys are alluding to, and correct me if I'm wrong, you guys are probably a little bit upset about the Jeremy Grant thing.
Not so. No, I mean, I'm not gonna lie. When we were talking about upgrading power forward last offseason, Jeremy Grant would have been really nice,
right?
And he would look really good in the starting lineup. And there are times where I'm like, I wonder what happened if we had traded Patrick Williams for Jeremy Grant. But I don't really fault them for that. I think it's really just going back to this offseason where they had resources to improve the team and they chose not to use those resources because of the luxury tax. Like we talk about, what was it, the traded player exception, I think, that they let expire. They didn't use the full mid-level exception as well. So like it's those type of things. It's trading Kyle Korver to save what was it, like
$5 million.
Like five,
it was like a couple of million.
Yeah, like a couple of million when they were trying to compete. Trading a good player who then went on to help another team compete and get to an Eastern Conference. It's things like that where you're just kind of like, what are you doing?
Right. And I mean, the Jeremy Grant thing is it's just like certainly there's some Bulls fans that brought up Jeremy Grant as a player that Bulls should target, but it was also tough to trade for him just simply because the Bulls didn't really have matching contracts unless you're going to give up a player that's a big part of your rotation. That was the issue. And obviously there was also like not trading Patrick Williams. Now that's more of a front office thing where guys like Arturas and Mark Eversley, they just are so high on Pat that they don't want to give him up in a trade. But yeah, it just kind of, like it said, like Edward said, it comes down to when the Bulls had the opportunities to use their full mid-level exception this season or this offseason to go in and really address either rim protection or shooting. They didn't do either of those. They went out and obviously the cheap route because again they had that those handcuffs placed on them saying, okay, you cannot go over the luxury tax. And when you're trying to maximize the talent, especially when you've built a roster to win now in a sense, and you've allowed your GM to and executive VP to make aggressive moves in a win now situation where you've traded away multiple draft picks, all of a sudden to say, no, we're just going to get conservative. You can't pay the tax. We're not going to let you do these moves to really improve the team. It kind of puts a bad taste in people's mouths, and it just kind of becomes deep frustrating off of that in that regard as well.
Yeah. No, I mean, I can understand that. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm kind of the camp where it's like, these billionaires who usually, own these teams, they already have amassed like a great deal of wealth. So like, if you're going to, I don't know, if I had money like that, I would, and I wanted to own a team, like it would just be like, I'm of the camp where like, I'm going to do whatever, like, okay, whatever you think of Mark Cuban, like the character, like I feel like he's done. And I guess this is funny because like he did let Jalen Brunson walk and Steve Nash walk, but he's done a lot to make sure that like the Mavericks have like the resources they need in the past. Like if you listen to former players talk about like just the amenities that he would kind of provide for the team, how much he's upgraded facilities and stuff. And it's just like, forget like who he is, the person, all that stuff. But like in terms of, just doing whatever it takes to win and wanting to win and being enthusiastic about winning. I feel like that's how every owner should be.
Like a Steve Ballmer is a good example of,
oh yeah.
Just having a bunch of, he's obviously a billionaire, but so is Cuban, and so are Reindorf. Pretty much every NBA owner is a billionaire because the value of the franchise are worth generally over $1 billion, unless you're getting very low and in the market area. But yeah, like, that should be your mindset, but obviously these the Reinsdorfs are always thinking about, year-to-year revenue and maximizing the year-to-year revenue, net revenue threshold, and that's what generally usually comes down to for them. It feels like not that they don't want to win, it's not the number one priority. It's like profits, and then winning is two.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and that sucks.
And it's interesting because even with this mindset, the Bulls still bump their heads into like really genius moves. Like you think of a guy just going to a store and trying to be as cheap as possible and just finding an amazing deal like over and over again. Like sometimes the Bulls just have a knack for finding these like really cheap, like solid additions sometimes. Like you think back to what Nate Robinson meant to the Bulls however many years ago. Like they really kind of stumbled into that. Like even Marco Bellinelli was something that they stumbled into. There's a long list of cheap additions, and I think Goran Dragic and Andre Drummond are kind of the next in that timeline where, again, like fans did not hate these moves, but it's underwhelming considering their general expectations. But you look at what they've done so far this season. Dragic has been fantastic for the Bulls. Like he looks like he does not look washed at all. Like he's playing solid minutes. He's scoring the ball. He can shoot a little bit, giving a solid veteran presence. Andre Drummond is the backup that we really needed last season, and he's been rebounding the ball like crazy, giving us that athletic protection, like that athletic presence at the rim. So it seems like they've knocked both of these signings out of the park. Like, are you surprised by what they've looked like so far this season? I mean, it's still early, but like these are the type of beneficial moves that sometimes the Bulls just kind of stumble into when they are being a little cheap,
Yeah, so you're saying, am I surprised about Drummond and Dragic or the team as a whole?
Oh, just Drummond and Dragic and what they brought to the team.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, I hate to be that guy with the Dragic thing, but I just have a hard time believing the 3-point percentage is going to continue. Sure. I know he's been raking them up, and he's always been like a solid 3-point shooter, but never that caliber. But he's like a nice guy, kind of energizes your bunny, throw him in there for like little spurts, contained spurts where he can really juice your offense up, and keep things afloat. I know they like to have, when LaVine's playing, they like to have either LaVine or DeRozan out on the floor. So it's nice to have Dragic also on the floor. And then with Drummond's kind of like DeRozan in the sense that, people like overcorrected for them a little bit too much. They were so overrated by like people, like the general public. And then we learned more about how basketball works and efficiency and all that stuff. And then we're like, wait, Andre Drummond and DeRozan aren't like as great as we thought they were. And then we brought them both like so down. We're to a point where we like overcorrected and we made them underrated. That's what happened with DeRozan, and I think that's happening with Drummond now, where it's like, a guy, the league's best defender is probably not the guy who averages the most rebounds per game, but he is like, he has a lot of utility. He's got like really strong hands. He's just like a strong body. He's probably the only guy on the team who could really play like a drop coverage, act as like a drop big. I don't think, that's really where Vooch thrives, but so he gives them like some scheme versatility in that regard, where they can go with Vooch at the level or hedging or, trapping or whatever, or then they can go with Drummond dropping, kind of staying closer to the paint. And then when they really want to, they can have like Pat Williams and Derek Jones out there, and they go like small ball and they can switch everything. So yeah, I think that they both are useful. Like I said, they're kind of relief guys, where when you're thinking about the playoffs, like one of them might be a little bit more valuable than you would think, and they just come in handy. And if they like end up, winning a series or two, it's good to have a bunch of different tools in your toolbox. But again, and this is going to come back later when we talk about the pros and cons, but this team has a lot of guys, but they also don't have a lot of two-way guy, like playoff two-way guys. Not like I think there's a difference between regular season two-way guys and playoff two-way guys, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah, I think you make a good point in that regard. They have to be very, very like asymmetric in a sense as a team defensively.
Mm-hmm.
Like they have to rely on each other. You have to communicate. And that's why a guy like AC is so important.
I love him.
As a vocal leader out there, like you see him getting on guys. You see him yelling at DeRozan when he does not rotate over on the weak side or just makes a mistake. You see him getting on guys. I know Pat, we're high on as far as trying to become that weak side defender, the backside and weak side defender as well. Io is obviously a guy's a two-way guy, one of the few two-way guys on this team. But no, you're spot on as far as not having enough two-way guys. And I'll say to Zach, I think his defense has kind of gotten how bad it has gotten like overly criticized at this point. Not to say he's a good defender, but I think he's a lot more engaged now than he ever used to be. I would probably put him closer to a below average defender now, especially so like his on-ball defense is good, I think, for the most. Like you rarely see him really get beat on ball, and then his off-ball is mostly like there's times he gets caught ball watching. But for the most part, he's done a better job of like stunting and helping out and rotating and moving his feet and trying to make sure he's in the right spots. Off ball as well. So no, you're spot on when you mention like not having enough two-way guys.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that makes that difficult is because of how this team is built around three guys who are really not strong defenders individually. So now you're kind of at a like disadvantage trying to like compensate around that afterwards. Like you look at a team like Boston and Jaylen Brown and Tatum, like you can play those guys interchangeably anywhere. Like Boston can really switch like pretty much everything. Like all of their best players are at least competent defensively, and that helps a lot. So that's just the one thing I think that like if we're talking about the playoff two-way guys, I think that's the one thing that makes it really harder for this Bulls team is because of how this team is built.
Right, 100%. And speaking of obviously two-way guys, we've talked a little bit about Pat Williams' development, and a lot of young players developing. Not everyone develops the same. Not every player is the same as far as when they come into the league. A lot of times people will take Pat Williams as look at Scotty Barnes, and like Scotty is doing all these things. Why can't Pat do all those things as well? And that's where things get lost in the conversation is every player develops differently, and every player has a different skill set and things that they're used to doing as far as what they provide and what they can do on the court. And playing with guys like Zach and DeMar, Pat has to learn how to be an off-ball player better, like learning to cut to the basket, learning to play within like in a pick and roll environment where you can come in and set screens for Zach and DeMar, and then roll to the basket where he can one of them can get him as a cutter, things like that. So it's like a process to learn those things. What have you seen from Pat Williams so far, like that, encourages you, and maybe there's some things that maybe just like things that concern you as well, like as far as the overall product that he is so far?
Well, okay. So again, I don't watch him as much as you guys, so maybe the fantasization is like it's over for you guys, but it's kind of hard not to see like his big frame, those giant claws, and then you see him hit like a midi pull up and pick and roll and think to yourself like, wait, could he be Kawhi Leonard someday? Like it's like it's just like you think to yourself for a second, you're like, no, Kawhi's Kawhi. He's a special player. It's hard to don't put that on Pat's plate. I think it's funny, like the Scotty thing, because like I know Eastern Conference, similar age. I think Scotty's just a different
Seems
type of.
cool,
Scotty's a lot
right?
like no, yeah, yeah, different. It's like Scotty's a lot more flexible than Pat. Pat's more of
Right.
like a stiffer guy. That's not a bad thing. It's just a little more flexible than him. He's going to be able to do different stuff. I don't think that's that's really like that. I mean, I feel like it doesn't take that long to kind of identify that part. So I don't understand. I'm not like the kind of like guys like trying to compare people's developments and stuff like that. I'm not really into that. I know that Pat, from what I've seen so far this year, had a tough start. In these last couple of games, he's really upped the aggression, and I'm liking that. And a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about with like who are your two-way guys that you can trust in the playoffs not to get picked on. I think a lot of it hinges on I think three things really, and one of it's can Pat Williams be like I don't know, like an above average starter by postseason time? Can he be that guy by then? And I mean, another thing is, I know you guys you want to talk about him is Io. I have a question about Io. And then the last thing, this is the thing that like eats at me every day. And I think about him all the time, hoping I could just see him play basketball again, is Lonzo Ball. Cause I feel like that team's like the whole, like everything. Cause can I just like make like a little, can I deviate for like a second? Go
Go
Lonzo
ahead.
Ball.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, like, so I was listening to, Ben Taylor, Thinking Basketball Guy. He does the Sub All-Star pod, right?
Hmm.
And of course, like last season, DeRozan, LaVine, All-Stars, right? Pretty firmly. I think they played like All-Stars. They deserve the nod, right? In his Sub All-Stars, so we're talking about guys he thought were top 50. He had those two. He had Caruso, our guy. He had Lonzo Ball, and then on the outside looking in, so you could say he's like a top 60 guy, he had Vooch. That's five top 60 guys. Okay. Like that's like the Phoenix Suns last year arguably had five top 75 guys, right? If you think about Paul, Booker, Ayton, Cam Johnson, and Mikal Bridges, I would say top 75 guys. So you have five top 60 guys, and then you have Pat Williams, and it's like, that hurts me. That one hurts me. But I wanted to express that with you guys. But
Oh yeah, for sure.
yeah, that's pretty much it.
Lonzo is the sub also like a high level role player, like
Mhm.
a guy that almost impacts a game at an all-star level.
He's a two-way playoff guy. He's a guy like in the playoffs,
Yeah,
I can trust
exactly.
him on both sides of the ball.
Everything the Bulls want to do and are lacking, he provides. Like
Mhm.
the playing with pace, he's probably one of the best full court guards and the wings in this league. Uh, Defensively, like on his on ball as a point of attack defensively, he's improved that. And then as a roamer defensively too, he's so good. Like that's what the Bulls want to do. They be disruptive and be able to get out on the break defensively. And Lonzo with Caruso, they just are just absolute like I always compare them to the Mighty Ducks. You ever watched the Mighty Ducks, Matt? Like
Oh, I
the
haven't
Bash
seen it. I haven't
Brothers.
seen it. I know that it's like
Okay.
getting back in vogue because of
No, right.
the
Well, it's an
miniseries on
old
Disney.
'90s movie,
Yeah.
but so the Bash Brothers, let me explain to you, are these two like a hockey. It's a hockey movie, so but there's these two uh these tough like bully goon type players. That's what they are, and they just
Mhm.
like defensively they just check guys against the board. They just like mess everything up for the other team's
Mhm.
offense, and that's what when Lonzo and Caruso are playing together, that's what they are for the Bulls defense. They're the Bash Brothers,
No,
and no,
I'm
yeah. So you
convinced. I'm convinced. I'm sorry to cut you off here, but I'm
no, go
convinced
ahead.
that 20 games of Caruso and Ball and their like point of attack, just thievery, like it brought point of attack defense back into vogue. Like
Oh
NBA
my
Twitter was
God.
like out on point of attack defense. They're like, oh, it's just rim protection and off ball and defensive playmaking. No, Caruso and Lonzo Ball, like you can have a top 10 defense just by having like two guys who will not let the ball get like behind them. You know what I mean? Like the
No,
ball will stay in front
exactly.
of him.
Exactly. And like I said, to go on about Lonzo, like again in the shooting,
Mhm.
he is one of the best, spot up shooters in the league. Like a high volume guy that shoots over 40%. And again, that's what the Bulls lack shooting too. So yeah, it's just we're hoping that, he can overcome this knee injury really and he can come back and be the guy that he was. Luckily he's not a player that plays above the rim. He doesn't rely on athleticism a lot to really do what he does. Like in the grand scheme of things, when you consider like a lot of the more athletic parts that have come into this league, but we'll see. We're all crossing our fingers here and hoping that if he comes back this season and we have a good feeling that he will. At least that's how the Bulls feel that he will. And that he can go back to at some point being that.
Yeah, can I ask really quickly, not to jump ahead here, but this is like one of the things I had in my notes, and like I'm well aware that there's a significant difference at this moment between the two players, but how far is Io from being Lonzo Ball? Because I feel like he's like a similar type of player.
I would give him like I don't know if he
like what's missing to you guys.
I think Lonzo is better at running the show. I think like Lonzo has those point guard skills. If you go back to like his college days, like he has that ability to kind of like run an offense and kind of set some guys up, I think. And I think he's just a little bit more polished as a shooter as well. I think Io can get to that point, even though there'll be different players, but I think that Io could get to a point where he has a similar impact. But I just think that ability for Lonzo to still be able to set some guys up like in transition on the break and being able to play that point guard role, I think that is a pretty noticeable difference that we saw earlier last season, because Lonzo could get a board and he could like lead the break and he could set guys up. He can throw those lobs. Like he could, we don't want him as a primary creator, but like just doing it in pockets, I think worked a little bit.
Yeah. So to me, like the three key areas that Lonzo is just better at, defensively overall, like I was a good defender. Not saying he is a bad defender, but I think the impact, the nuance and the levels that Lonzo brings, it's a little higher than Io on the defensive end. Shooting wise, I mean, Io's improved his shooting, but I still feel like when you consider high volume shooting and more reliable, like I would feel more confidence in a healthy Lonzo being a guy that could knock down like 4 or 5 threes in a game if given the opportunity. And then like with Edward, what he said with the open court, playing in the open court, he just has one of those rare knacks of finding guys up court. Like that's a gift. Like that's a rare, like the vision that he has. Like when he gets the ball, he immediately can see up court and gets the ball quickly up court. And that's obviously a rare. I don't know if it's a dying skill set in today's league, but like those full court passes that he makes, I mean, and a lot of it's obviously highlight related, and I'm sure you've seen last season with
the one with LaVine.
Yeah, where he's kind of essentially just baseball throws it. He gets it quickly from Caruso right under the other side of under the basket, and quickly set up there. And that's just you don't see stuff like that a lot in today's league. As much as you would. There's not a lot of guys that have that ability, and Io's not there yet with his full court passing. I do think Io is a better half court point guard because just the ability that Io can put pressure on the rim. Like Lonzo is not really like Lonzo to me should never shoot be under inside the arc. Like his range game is non-existent. He's terrible at finishing at the rim. I always say like Lonzo just shoot 10 threes a game.
Shane Battier?
just shoot 10 threes a game. That's all I need you to do. I don't need you stepping inside, trying to take that elbow jump shot, because I think there was a moment last season he was like 0 for 26 on that elbow jump shot that he kept trying to do out in that mid-range area. I don't know why he kept trying to do it, but he just could not make that shot. It's like, all right, knock it out. This is not your game. Just step behind the arc and just shoot threes.
Yeah. Okay. I just always wonder where you guys are at with it. Because like obviously, like I think my biggest thing with Io is like he's like shooting what right now? About like I don't have the number in front of me, but he's like at last time I checked 39, 40%. Yeah, 40% from three.
The volume's not there yet, but like, I think he's getting there for sure. And I think, like I said, I think getting into the conversation about Ayo and his progress too, a lot of times you kind of get stuck in that situation where people look at you as where you were drafted at, and I think Pat falls into that trap as well. Because he's the fourth overall pick, so people expect certain things out of him, and if you're not hitting that certain expectation, people want to just call you a bust right away. And obviously Pat being very young, there's time still, and there's time for development and that process still to kick in. But you look at Iowa on the other side, he's a second round pick. So a lot of times people still maybe have that mindset and they're like, okay, his ceiling is not that high because he was a second round pick. But I do think his ceiling is higher than I think what a lot of people might be anticipating.
Yeah, and I mean, like my thing, like I was just talking to somebody about this the other day with Jabari Smith, and I was saying, like, honestly, I think like Jabari Smith's best used, like let him be a play finisher, let him finish plays, let him be a punctuator, right? Because you already have all these creators, you have these guys who can facilitate and put dents in the defense, like. And my buddy's like, but he was a third overall pick. Like, wouldn't you want more from your third overall pick? I'm like, honestly, dude, you don't get points for getting all your high leverage picks right. You get points for drafting great players and acquiring great players, and however you do it, however you stumble upon that, it doesn't matter as long as you draft great players that work together. But back to the Io thing, my big thing is like, yeah, he's a 40% shooter in the regular season, but in the playoffs, when they like the Bucks, they use that ice coverage. They brought two to the ball to DeRozan. They're like, okay, who's gonna beat us from three? And LaVine was kind of beat up. He couldn't really do it, and they were putting a little bit more of LaVine. But like, can Io hit those threes? That's like where I'm at. And I feel more confident with Lonzo because, like, exactly, I don't know, like you said, the higher volume really is a good indicator. And I think he's worked so much on that shot with like taking out all the different outside variables in his motion that, yeah. So that's kind of my big thing with Io. And that's like just to kind of take us back into, like you mentioned, we wanted to talk about not to like give away the master plan for this podcast, but you guys wanted to talk about the Bulls and my overall thoughts. So I think that's my biggest takeaway still is like, who are the guys when, whoever it is runs ice or ices DeRozan ball screens, sends him to the corner, puts two on him. Who are the guys who are going to make them pay for it? Who are those two-way guys? And then if you put out an offense with enough shooters, do you have the defensive person? You always have the scheme. Billy Donovan's scheme's always going to put you in the dance. Like you're always going to be good. You're going to be in the right spot. The question is, do you have the personnel to execute that? I think that's my biggest question about this Bulls team.
So we kind of like lump everything together here. So earlier I was saying the Bulls are kind of at a disadvantage because their top three players are not two-way players, right? Mm-hmm. So that really only leaves two other positions on the court where they can get some two-way value. Lonzo Ball is out. Hopefully we can get him back at some point this season, and hopefully he can return to form. If he does, then that's one of those guys you were talking about where
it changes everything.
Yeah, he's postseason ready. He can knock down the shots. He can increase your pace of play in the open court, point of attack defender. He fits what you need out of that point guard spot. And the other part is, and we've been talking about this all off season, is really just about that 4 spot. And as much as we want Patrick Williams to succeed, you always have to wonder in the back of your mind, is like his game is not really conducive to what this team needs when it matters, because he's been really aggressive this week. Like that's been a really good plus. Like we've seen him put the ball on the floor more. He's taking shots. Like he's into the offense more this week. So that was something that we were all looking forward to seeing, and it finally happened. But we still, like, I still look at that 4 position as, man, it would be great if we had a two-way 4 who could play 3-4 and can knock down those threes. And we knew that was missing last offseason. So we were talking about, man, could we get, we talked about it at the top of the show, could we get a Jeremy Grant? Could we get a Harrison Barnes? Could we get a Kyle Kuzma? Could we get someone like that who you put them at the 4, they knock down shots at least, and maybe and hopefully the defense is pretty solid too. So I agree with you that I think those are the things that we have to wonder, and that's something that they're gonna have to look at approaching the trade deadline. Like, how are they gonna handle the four? If Patrick Williams is still kind of up and down. Like, Javonte Green has been solid this season, but like he's not someone that fits your definition. Like, you can't really trust him with those shots in the postseason, right? So
yeah, no, I don't trust. I don't think the thing is, it's like it's not about what you can do. It's what you think you can make the defense think you can do. You know what I mean? I don't think the defense will hard close out on Javonte Green or account for him when they're deciding what kind of ball screen coverage they want to go with.
Yeah, you're right. So the Bulls really need Lonzo back for sure, and they need that type of guy at the four who you're just like, man, I can't leave him open because he's gonna kill us. So yeah,
Edward, I'm curious, what's your mileage on? Because this is like the guy, I'm sure we all like just are so giddy every time we're watching. We hear his mouth just going. He's telling everybody what to do. He's like everyone's favorite player, how hard he plays, and just how serious he is, and all the defensive stuff. But like, what's your mileage on healthy ball? Caruso, DeRozan, LaVine, Vooch, closing five. Like, what's the ceiling on that to you?
So you're saying Caruso, Ball, LaVine, DeRozan, Vooch. I mean, I think
Caruso's the hypothetical last guy.
I think it's a solid lineup, but I just don't trust AC yet. Like, AC's a great player, but I think he's just kind of like really, kind of like up and down as a shooter to me. Like, like last season he was like 33-ish%. This season he's shooting the ball a little bit more, but like he's not really a high volume shooter. So like if you're leaving him open and teams are daring you to make him take those shots, then all of a sudden we're turning him into a high volume shooter, and I don't know how he's going to do in that role. So
my one thing with Caruso where I make the exception is he plays with so much conviction. Like, he is the master of the 0.5 rule. Coaches always say make a decision in 0.5 seconds when you get the ball, either pass, dribble, or shoot, right? And he's like the king of that. And I feel like because of that, he's able to mitigate a lot of his problems as a shooter, as opposed to like a lot of these other guys we were talking about. But I don't know, that's just why that in my notes, one of the things I was watching the Philly game, and I just thought he was so good with the rotations and the communications in that game. He was so integral in bringing them back that game. And I'm just like, why doesn't, because I know that DeSumo doesn't play that game. DeSumo doesn't play that night, so he ends up starting. But I'm just like, in my notes, I'm like, why doesn't this guy play like 30 minutes a night,
Yeah, so the biggest reason he doesn't is because how hard he goes on every night. He doesn't, he's jumping at every loose ball. He's taking hits to his body. And I think they've discovered that when he plays too many minutes, he starts picking up nagging injuries. And last season, obviously, he had the big injury to the wrist, but throughout he started having back issues of the various little things that had happened. So I think Billy wants to keep him in that between 25 and 30 and less than 30. So around like maybe 27-minute mark to kind of keep him fresh and not take too much damage on his body, especially because Caruso does end up guarding a lot of bigger guys too. He'll guard like the fours. Oftentimes when the Bulls go small. So like I think that's one reason why. The other reason, like to Ed's point, his shooting is inconsistent, and like he is good as a quick as a connector in the half court, but I don't know what the reasoning is as far as this season. I've seen him try to handle the ball a little bit too much in the half court, like as an initiator. And I don't know if that's something Billy's telling him to do or that's something he's doing himself. And I think that needs to be cut out. But the biggest reason he is not playing over 30 minutes is because of that. It's just to kind of keep him healthy and not to get his body all banged up as the season goes on. Because like I said, he's another one, we call him I called him a bash brother, right? He just goes balls to the wall, and they don't want him hurting himself, putting too much on his body and picking up nagging little injuries where he ends up having to miss time.
He's defensive Manu Ginobili.
Yeah, exactly. He's just such a like a maniac out there. So like that's the biggest reason that they don't want to do that. And I think like ideally, so Pat, I'm still again, and I think there's I'm probably a little bit more patient too in regards to overall with him than other Bulls fans are, and maybe it's to a fault that I'm a little more patient. I just to me it's like learn like he missed most of last season, so people always talk about like you can work out in the off season, work on your game however you want, but you're not going to actually you get better unless you put that practice into action. And missing all that time, that affects you. Two, he does have to learn how to play with this group, like learn how to play with Zach, Vooch, DeMar, or Zach, Vooch, DeMar, that trio. Get a feel for playing with them and learn how he can find his spots from those guys because all those guys are high usage players. And Pat needs to figure out, okay, well, this is the spots I can um, take advantage of, especially because he's a lot more comfortable as an on-ball player right now than doing those little off-ball movement things. Um, and his shooting is a work in progress too. Like tonight, he was 3 of 6 from three, which is great. Defensively too, he's still like kind of getting the consistency down. Where you still see him make a few mistakes here and there, but for the most part, like I feel like his defense has been decent overall. I would say like he's had games where he's been bad. He's had games where he's been spot on, really good. Like the last game, I guess I would say against Boston, he had a good first half, and then the second half, I thought he played good defense, but he just had a lot of other blunders. Like he turned the ball over. Um, I think he had just a bunch of missed shots. But I'd rather see that. It's about him just continuously being active. And tonight, I feel like again it was more so about missed shots than anything. Like I didn't get to finish most of the game, so I don't know how he looked defensively to finish the game. But I thought like outside of like a one or two possessions where he just got kind of stuck in a bad position. Like I know there was one play I remember he like Scotty Barnes kind of just blew by him because I think Pat kind of overhelped, and then when he was trying to get back to Scotty, Scotty just kind of put the ball on the floor and just and reminding me of like an old like Sean Marion just zooming past a guy and dunk two-hand dunking it in really quick. So that happened as well. So like I said, I think what we're seeing from Pat right now is just the activity. If he keeps at it, I feel pretty confident that the Bulls will be fine at the four. But again, it's going to come down to me. I don't know if I'm kind of rambling on here and losing track of my the conversation, but I think, like I said, to me, it's going to no, yeah. To me, I think it's going to come down to again like where Lonzo's at, and maybe there's like another move um, that AK and Mark can make at the trade deadline. And obviously, we're a long ways from that, and there's so many different variables. There's so many variables right now. There's just like Zach is not back to his normal
We haven't even
self. Like
talked about that. We haven't even talked about that yet.
Yeah, like there's so many Bulls fans. Oh man, they piss me off so damn much. There's so many Bulls fans that keep bringing up this damn contract. Oh, this is our max player. It's like, dude, he's just coming off of a knee injury surgery. He needs to work his way back. Do you understand? He was rehabbing all offseason. He wasn't playing 5-on-5. A guy like Zach, like, yeah, he works. He's a hard worker. He works very hard in his game. But when you watch him, he's constantly playing 5-on-5 basketball all off season long. He does like the Seattle has like a Drew League equivalent.
Mm-hmm.
He does that, and then there's other pickup stuff he does all off season. So he wasn't doing any of that. So that feel for the game is gone. And then again, he has to trust his knee again to kind of get comfortable, get that feel back when he's attacking the basket. That's going to take some time for him to get comfortable doing that. So that's the other thing. Not having a normal Zach LaVine is also affecting what the Bulls are doing. And for me, when I look at those little things, like those so many different variables that we're missing right now, it's like I'm not that upset with where we're at right now. We're like 20, 30 games in. We'll see where we're at because I think by then Zach will be back to normal and I think we'll have a better grasp on what Pat's doing too. And then we can probably have a better assessment with this where this team can really finish.
No, I'm with you, both of you guys, on the LaVine stuff, I actually just recently found out that this, like I said, I'm not like into the entire like culture of Chicago Bulls and all the minutia, so I don't hear everything. But like I was just recently, doing some digging, and I realized like people are like generally complaining about LaVine getting money, and like I'm just gonna say this, I'm gonna leave it at that. If you guys want me to expand, I can expand, but
No,
me, Zach LaVine's their best player.
he is. Like, come on, guys. Like, Zach is like people will like go overly critical on him to an absurd level. Like, okay, he's not a top 10 player. Fine. He's not, and he probably not. He's not even a top 15 player. Okay, I'm not going to argue that. But the criticism he gets is like, do you guys like? Do fans actually watch the NBA? Do you watch other teams? Like, you look at other teams, and obviously Donovan Mitchell this season has started off really well, and he just looks like a different player on the defensive end. He looks like he's putting better effort on the defensive end, and he's just been a monster for Cleveland. But when I look at guys like Devin Booker, Donovan Mitchell, Bradley Beal, those guys are very comparable to Zach. They're all comparable players, and you can have an argument about who's better than who and what. Each of them have a different skill that they're better at than the other, but it's just astonishing to me how Zach, who's been generally stuck with terrible teammates until last season, gets this like empty calorie player, this bad, terrible teammate player persona or personality or like reputation, if you will. But all these other guys, they're just they're winners. They're elite superstars. It's like, I don't know. I that's why I question, like, do these people actually watch the rest of the NBA? Are they watching it, or are they just taking ESPN hot take? People just that's how they're getting their information. I don't know. It's always perplexing to me.
Yeah, Zach is it's been interesting seeing how the labels on Zach have changed throughout the years. Like, every year he has like a new hurdle to climb. Like, first it was to validate the Jimmy Butler trade, and he can't come back from the AC. Like, he's never going to be the same after the ACL tear. He's just a dunker. Like, he's a black hole, puts up empty calories. Like, he's not going to be worth the $78 million contract. And I was a doubter for the contract as well at that point too. But he's not going to be worth that contract. He can't become an all-star. Like, he can't become an all-star again. He can't repeat that season again. Like, it's always something. It's like that, what's that car commercial I always see with football where it's like, they said they couldn't do this. They said we couldn't do that. Then it's like, it's always something with Zach. And now he has this $200 million contract, the first Bulls player in history to have a contract of $100 million or more, which is still a really fun fact, by the way. But now he has this hurdle to climb, and then it still has the knee injury that he's been rehabbing on top of it. So it's always a new flaming hoop for Zach LaVine to jump through. And so far in his tenure as a Bull, he's been jumping through hoops and he doesn't have any flames on him. He's just been making it out clean each and every time. So I give him credit for continuing to do this over and over again. Now, I get why fans are a little frustrated and impatient, because so much of his season depends on what's going to happen with him and this knee and being able to string these games together. But like, they really have to play the long game here. And hopefully, as they continue to do that, we continue to see more flashes like we did in the game against Brooklyn, where he single-handedly carried that team in the fourth quarter with 20 points in the fourth. Was on fire, man.
Scored Brooklyn.
Yeah.
So that's what we know Zach LaVine can do. So it's just always interesting to see what new mountain he has to climb this time around. Like, it's always going to be something, because frankly, I think many fans just did not like the player coming in, and they are still waiting to just be left with the bag. And now that there's a $200 million contract with it, they're like, oh yeah, it's just a matter of time now.
Yeah, like, what are your general? I know you say you're a fan of Zach, but like, what is your general thoughts on that? Like, when you see those, when we're telling you about those type of criticisms that he receives, like, what are your general thoughts of that?
Well, I'm gonna be honest. Like, I think it's weird as hell whenever somebody like comes at people like for making like it's like weird because like in every other profession, people will like cheer you on, like, yeah, get the bag, man, get the bag. Like,
Right.
I know plenty of people. I have plenty of people in my life who work like, like cushy office jobs, don't do like much of anything, and like they make a bunch of money, and I'm like, hell yeah, man, like why not? Like just like do nothing. Let's get drunk on a Tuesday. Let's like do all that. You're making great money. Why not? But it's like with basketball, like LaVine just got the bag, and everyone's like pocket watching the guy, like it's coming out of us. Like I understand you're upset because like that does take away some of your flexibility as a team moving forward. Fine, whatever. But like you got to understand, like, I think him taking a leap, if he took a passing leap, a playmaking leap a little bit, that like vaults him like firmly for me into all NBA caliber. But like this guy is like one of the most versatile scorers in the, like he can do everything as a scorer, and it's kind of insane. And I think one of the things really, and this is like a minor nitpick on him in his slow start to the season, I feel like he's been driving looking for fouls. Like I see like this guy's just like trying to get the call, and I'm like, is LaVine like, oh, I got the contract now, maybe I get like a little bit more juice like with free throw calling? Because I feel like that might be part of the poor rim finishing. I've noticed it. I don't know if you guys have noticed that at all, or it's just like maybe I saw a weird sample size of it.
I think the issue is he's still not really comfortable getting off the ground off that knee. I think that's
I get that part.
I think it definitely like he is trying to focus on getting to the line more. But that's been a battle for Zach for a while now because he does get a poor whistle compared to your other stars. Because a lot of times you look at the replay of a play that he was driving to the basket, and you see how all of a sudden they got raked across the arms, and it's like, dude, that's a clear foul. That should have been 2 free throws for Zach. What's going on? Like, and they those the refs don't call it. And obviously, maybe to in that defense too, I'll say like I probably pay attention to that more to Zach than other superstars do, and obviously other superstars I'm sure are also getting kind of jobbed. I kind of said the other day too, like if they call a foul every time for a star player, because star players do get fouled a lot. Like we just don't notice it because, for one thing, like a guy like Giannis, while he does get away with elbows, he's also getting hacked a lot that they don't call, because if they called it every time, he would shoot like 30 free throws a game, and nobody wants that. So like at some point you got to let some stuff go, and also the speed of the game, refs end up missing stuff like that too. So, but yeah, I think he's trying to test his knee more too. I think that's the other thing. He's trying to get a little bit more comfortable, and the only way to do that is just to kind of force the issue and try to attack the basket as much as possible.
Yeah. And it's still funny though, because even though he's still getting used to, to playing again with this knee issue, like he's still shooting 42% from 3 on like elite volume on like 7 threes a game, like 57% true shooting. So I mean, like if that's as bad as it gets for Zach LaVine, like I'm cool with this right now. Like I'm cool with this for a little bit more. Like it's, if he was like playing like he did when he came back from when he first got traded to the Bulls after the ACL, then yeah, but dude is still putting up like above average offensive numbers right now. So
yeah, and Matt, to your point, like his scorer, like he is like one of the handful of 3-level elite scorers of this league,
and it's on and off ball. It's on and off ball.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
That's such a rare thing. Like people don't understand that. That's not normal for a guy to be able to be elite on and off the ball like the way Zach is
at 3 levels.
So that's why he's underappreciated. Like I get the defense. I get it. He's not a good defender, and he does have those lapses. We've talked about that. And again, he's gotten a lot better. His activity's gotten a lot better, and he's not the whole black hole he was on the defensive end that he used to be. I get that. We're not going to argue that aspect, lie and say he's a good defender now. But like, you can't ignore what he does offensively. You just cannot. And that's what a lot of people do. They just underappreciate that. And they don't realize that what he's doing is not normal. It's not like just a normal feat amongst the NBA, other NBA greats, other NBA stars. It is a very rare talent that he has. Mm-hmm. So yeah, the Zach thing will continue forever. I think. I don't think anyone's ever gonna give him his just due in this town. I don't know. I don't know if that day will ever come. Maybe it'll come when he demands a trade. Maybe that's
for sure. No,
that's
for
when
sure.
People appreciate it.
Look, no. If you want to see a Bull appreciated, trade into another team. Guarantee. It's a different feeling watching someone 82 games a season and then just watching them every other game and then checking box scores and being like, man, he's playing so well. Yeah, because you're not invested and you're not watching the games. Like, it's just easier to appreciate it.
Yeah, it is what it is. Last discussion point before we let you go, want to wrap on this. I think like you and I have had a lot of conversations online about tanking versus competing, and overvaluing draft picks, the championship or bust culture, like the rings culture type of thing. I want to get a conversation going on that, because there was a lot of criticism for what the Bulls did last offseason, like trading picks for established players, going all in on, like going and getting a guy like DeMar DeRozan, trading picks for Vooch, and I'll grant it to say like they in hindsight they did end up overpaying for Vooch, no doubt about that. They probably would have been better off just doing one pick and Wendell as opposed to two picks, but. Like, I want to get your thoughts on that, because right now you see so many various teams out there that have like so many draft picks that's just continuing to tank, but then there's other teams that are like, let's try to we have certain talent on this team, let's try to maximize and try to get into the playoffs. Like what are your general thoughts on that? Because I think Edward and I are generally on the same page when it comes to that conversation.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to start with this. Like, I'm like, anyone who follows my work knows data is a strong part of my analysis. I'm the kind of person where if I was an NFL head coach and we were past midfield and it's 4th and short, I'm going for it every single time. You know what I mean? Like, I trust the data. I trust the numbers. I understand we use those not as an end all be all, but to give us a better chance of being right, to make us less wrong, as Seth Partnow says. I say that because, the data says, and I have actually Jake Fisher's book right in front of me. I'm not going to pull it out because it's in the middle of a stack. I don't want to cause a loud noise. But Jake Fisher's recent book, Built to Lose. And, the main takeaway is you tank because it gives you more bites at the apple. Like, you have mathematically a better chance of building a better team because you have more chances at obtaining a generational player, right? And I agree with that. But I think the way like the middle class worker in the NBA is like gone. And one of the reasons why we have like a lot of parity this year is because there's really only two kind of sects of teams. There's like the teams that think there's not every team thinks they can make the NBA finals, but there's like 15 teams who think like if a couple things break our way, we could be in the conference finals, and that's like, right. That's huge. Like if the Bulls made the conference finals, that'd be pretty sick, right?
That'd be amazing.
Yeah. And then there's like another half where it's like for example, I fear with Utah, like give it like another 10, 15 games. I think they're good. Like they're generally good. I think they're probably not like one of the best teams in the Western Conference, but I think they're a playoff team. I think they're solid. I love Vando, but I think there's going to come a point where Danny's like, okay, this was cute. We sold some tickets. You guys gotta go. Like, you guys gotta go. That 7'6", whatever he is, guy who can dribble in between like 13 people at once. Yeah. Like, he's available for the draft this year. So I'm sorry, you guys gotta go. You're not gonna do it and it's like there's like this dehumanization going on of like human beings with like this hoarding of cap and like. Man, so Steph No, huge Chicago Bulls guy, one of like my favorite people in this industry, one of the people I idolize the most. He had a tweet, and I've been trying to follow his philosophy where it's like you can't hate on like the way people appreciate the NBA. You shouldn't do that. It shouldn't be gatekeeping. You shouldn't be gatekeeping. I really try that in my life. I try to allow as many different types of people like to discuss the game with them, to enjoy it with them, because I think that's how like we wouldn't have like jobs talking about basketball the way we do if there wasn't people who appreciated it in different ways than us. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because there's not enough nerds out there. So but I say this because like the transactional fans, the fans who are only thinking about these weird hypotheticals about these super teams you could draft and about the future, and they're never like worried about the present, enjoying the now. Those people piss me off. Like, they piss me off a lot. Like, It's like I don't know. Like, there's like I don't know. Not like I have a lot of Thunder fan friends that I love, and I love the team. But like, it's like all these picks. They're like hypothesizing about like the different players they're gonna get and all this, and it's like every team's like so quick to pull the trigger on like just start a tank when they have like proven young talent. Like, for example, like the Spurs. Like I think that and they're doing pretty good this year, and like I love the organization. I think they've made a lot of great moves in the past, but like you have like DeJounte Murray is the reason you tank. You get good players like DeJounte Murray, and I know his style comes with trade-offs, but like that's the reason you tank. And so like to trade young players away for just this endless stupid cycle of just hoarding abstract capital is like it feels weird, because like one of the reasons why I love this game is because I love like the basketball players feel like characters, and like Draymond Green said it before, like this is like the best TV show on earth. They're characters in a story. And so like, oh, that's why I love this Bulls team. Like I love watching them because like, and I wanted to say this in the pros and cons, like this Bulls team does not have the personnel to be a top 10 defense, but I think they're going to be a top 10 defense this year because they play like, I love watching them scramble on defense because they scramble harder than almost any team in the NBA. When they're in rotation, they're going hard. Billy Donovan has got these guys coached up. When they played the Bucks, like they didn't lose because they didn't execute well. They executed that game plan the best it could have been executed. You know what I mean? It's just like they didn't have the personnel at the end of the day to deal with that.
Exactly.
And so like I say all this because like sometimes it's okay to just try to see what the limit, like how much does the math change for the Bulls? Like if Lonzo's good, if he's right and Zach's right, and they have those 5 top 60 guys we talked about, and then you have Pat who's growing, and then you could make them like, what does that team look like? And I think that's worth like staying the course. I think that's worth it. I think it's worth doing that than like this again. And I know why they do it. They do it because it helps them keep their job. Because you don't like, you can't get judged for something that hasn't happened yet. So if you just keep this delay tactic, but like, that's just my rant. That's my thing with tanking. I get it mathematically, smartest thing to do, best way for a small market team. But Chicago's not a small market, first of all. But anyways, that's my whole spiel on it. Sorry.
Let me ask you this.
No, you're good.
And maybe you said this earlier when you started, but do you think that fans today underrate watching just a pure playoff team or a pure playoff contender? Do you think fans underrate that? Because I think back to when I was younger, and like you think back to those 90s, like the 90s were arguably the best era of basketball. And so many fans have vivid memories of all of these teams that didn't really win championships. Like you think about Reggie's Pacers or something like that, or you think about a team like those Miami Heat teams, or like those Charlotte Hornets teams with like Zoe and Glenn Rice and whatever. And fans like those teams. And now, like as I get older, like I saw someone on my timeline who was like, man, I really miss that Wizards team with Gilbert Arenas and Caron Butler and Anton Jameson.
Right.
And it's just like, man, like that team never did anything. But it's like they were a consistent playoff team. But now it seems like if you're just a playoff team to some fans, not to everyone, but if you're just a playoff team, like it's like that's not enough. And it's like you can't just be that. And it's sometimes to me it feels that way, that fans now are just kind of like very dismissive of, oh, they're just a playoff team. Like there are some Bulls fans, I think, who would be like, oh, if this team makes the playoffs and they lose first round, like that's not enjoyable to me. I'd rather tank. And I just think about that. I'm just like, I don't know. I'd rather come home and watch entertaining Bulls games and watch a team win 20 games. But what do you think? Do you think fans like underrate that aspect?
Okay, maybe not 20 games.
Okay, 25, 27, I don't know.
So yeah, I think they do. So like here's something. My greatest flex of all time. I've watched all 82 games of the 2015-2016 Dallas Mavericks. That's the Darren Williams, Dirk Nowitzki, like Salah Mejri, Zaza Pachulia, like that team. It was Chandler Parsons, Wes Matthews coming off the Achilles tear. He was never really the same after that. But I watched all 82 games. One reason, because like Dirk Nowitzki is like my favorite player all time. First ever basketball game I ever watched was Dirk, so I loved Dallas because of that. I also like Darren Williams a lot, and I was hoping he had a little bit of juice left in him. Fortunately, didn't really after that season, but I watched all 82 games. They weren't like, I was 100% aware of the fact that this team would be lucky to win 2 games in a first round playoff series. You know what I mean? And so I enjoyed it. I remember the hell out of that season. I remember weird moments. I remember the call when Dirk hits his 40th point at age 37. I remember the exact call. I'm not going to do it because I'm going to butcher the call. I'm not going to say it as cool as he did, but I remember it against the Portland Trailblazers. It was a Sunday. But so I think those things are important to why we love basketball. Like, yeah, like, like I said, I've tried to shed a lot of my fandom. I try to look at things objectively. I know what the ceiling on this Bulls team is at this moment. I'll share it with you guys if you like, but I still enjoy it. I enjoy watching the Bulls. They make me, when I watch the Bulls, when I'm done with the games, when you like work basketball, like, first of all, like, I'm doing it while in school, but I spend a lot of time around the game. And so like, sometimes you get like desensitized to how cool the fact that you get paid to do a hobby is. But like, you forget because you got shit to do. I have an article due tonight. I'm kind of dreading it. But like, when I watch the Bulls, I'm like, man, this is like the sickest job ever. I get to watch teams like this all the time. So like, yeah, I don't know, man. That stuff's cool. I think fans do underrate it, to answer your question. I think that the championship bust thing, like, we just don't appreciate things enough as a society. I'm a young guy, and that's my boomer take right there. It's like, we just don't appreciate little things anymore,
It's funny, like, fans have become GMs too much.
Mm-hmm.
Stop. Yeah. It's like that. They think too much like GMs and not as fans. And it's funny, like you mentioned, like the teams that weren't that great. Like some of my most fondest Bulls memories are teams that
the 06-07
Bulls. The first round. Yeah, that team that just made it out of the first round. The Joakim Noah, Nate Robinson Bulls, that took the Nets to 7 games and beat them, and then lost to 5 to Miami in the second round. That game 7 that Joakim Noah had is forever one of my favorite games in Bulls history. Like, I love that game. To this day, I vividly remember Joakim Noah after game 6 hobbling because he has plantar fasciitis in like both feet, I think. He's like, we're not losing game 7. He said, we're fucking winning game 7. And then he goes out there and has one of the best games ever. Like 21 points, like 15 rebounds and like all these blocks. And the dude went out there with all heart and they won game 7. That's one of my favorite memories. Like Nate Robinson scoring like 26 points in the fourth quarter in that series. One of my favorite memories. So it's like,
fam, I still
appreciate
remember
that stuff.
I still remember Larry Hughes hitting a game winner in Utah.
Right.
And I love that moment. I think I YouTubed it the other day. I was like, yeah, this is awesome.
Right.
Like,
Larry Hughes.
And the other thing too, like, talking about you, because you brought up the Thunder, and they have so many picks. I get it. Okay, like you can do a lot with those picks, but at this point, to me, it's like, look, and maybe the conversation is a little different because Chet did get injured, but let's say Chet was healthy. I feel like Chet, Giddey, and SGA, those three are good enough young pieces to build around. Now go get like my co-host loves to say, Ed, get adults in the room. Get good, solid veterans. Trade some of those picks for some solid veterans so they can learn to win. And that's how you can also develop them as players. And I feel like they have something there. So why are you still tanking? Now, Chet is injured, but I don't think their plan would have changed if Chet was healthy. I think it was still trying to go into the season. It was still trying to go into the season, trying to tank and try to lose as much as possible. Obviously, SGA is just, saying, no, I'm going to win every game here. But, like I'm saying, though, that their plan wouldn't have changed. And that frustrates me. And to me, it's like, dude, what are you doing? You have enough young talent. You have a nice big three, young big three. Support that young big three now and start putting quality players around them so they can develop. And so you can start putting a good product on the court for your fans. I don't know. Like, that just frustrates me. That kind of stuff frustrates me. But yeah, that's my whole point of the whole, I get it. Everyone wants a championship in the end. Certainly I wish the Bulls had a generational player that they could build a contender, and I get that, but it's so hard.
Yeah, it's so tough.
You look at, we've talked about Giannis. Giannis was the 15th pick in the draft. How many teams passed on him thinking okay, well, this is this raw 18-year-old kid. He's we see the natural God-given ability, but will he actually develop? We don't know. So all these teams pass on him. You see sometimes a guy like Andrew Wiggins who's finally figured it out, but he's also has all this God-given talent. He goes number one, but he doesn't live up to that superstar mantle. It's just like I said, I think I like what Masai does, for example. He's just continuously gotten talent in the draft, built good teams, had at the cusp, and then when there's an opportunity, when the iron is hot, go get a Kawhi Leonard. Even if it's one season, you go all in and you win a championship. That's fine too. And then he's been able to retool quickly with Kawhi leaving, just because he's done such a great job with drafting and player development. Yeah. So I'd rather do that than every year tank. Toronto's not going to win a championship. They'll probably get into the second round, maybe, depending on how the seeding adds up. But I'd rather have that than try to continuously tank and lose and just build this ugly, losing culture.
Yeah, and we didn't just go through this too, the last 3 or 4 years before.
Yeah,
it's just the amount of variables involved in all of this. It's just for me as a fan in my older years now. I just don't have time. I just don't really care for it. Maybe when I was younger, I could probably get behind it more, but as an older fan now, I'm just I just see more value now in man, if I'm coming home and I can turn on the TV and see my team on ESPN playing a game, or on TNT, coming home watching them play the Brooklyn Nets, or man, can I go and watch them in person and get a good game? To me, things like that mean more. But when you're tanking, it's just all these different variables. The Bulls tanked, and it was the Luka year, they won the coin flip against Sacramento, but that was actually a bad thing. If they had lost the coin flip, then they would have gotten the number 2 pick, and then they could have drafted Luka Doncic, but apparently they wouldn't have drafted Luka Doncic if they had the number 2 pick. And then they finally jump into the top 4, and they in the LaMelo Ball year, and they miss LaMelo Ball by 1 spot. And so you're talking about the difference between LaMelo Ball, who looks like a potentially elite point guard for many years versus, and I don't hate Patrick Williams, but versus Patrick Williams. So it's just the difference of one spot. So it's just like all of these different variables come into play that it's just like you go 82 games and you get all of that. Like I've said it before, but like imagine being that Charlotte Hornets team that won 7 games that one year. 7 games. And they didn't get Anthony Davis. They got Michael Kidd-Gilchrist.
Yeah.
7 games. And you get Michael Kidd-Gilchrist. Like that's the NBA. And it's like, yeah, some team is gonna get Victor this year or in 2023, but it's just like, think of all the teams that are gonna be so bad watching all of this basketball that is uninteresting and just awful, and they're not going to get him. It's going to be the difference between a generational prospect and someone who, frankly, is not going to be as good. I mean, it's just, I don't know. It's just too much for me, man.
For sure. Well, Matt, we could go on forever for this conversation. I really appreciate you joining us. As we get wrapped up here, please let our listeners know where they can follow you, where they can find your work, anything that you're working, not even necessarily Bulls related, just something that you're writing that to look out for. Please let us know.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter. I think that's the easiest way to get a hold of me and my stuff. It's at MATISSA15. That's at MattIssa15. I write for a bunch of different sites, how the freelance thing works, but I cover the league at large for websites like SB Nation, Basketball News, The Analyst, and Fansided. So yeah, you can just find my work. It's easier. Just follow me on Twitter because I usually tweet out a link to any article I might write a couple of weeks. I watch a lot of basketball, think about basketball way too much. I'm going to do that right now. Probably not sleep, but who cares?
No, you're a hard worker, man, and I've followed you. I think I can't remember if I started following you when you started doing the GOAT podcast, like Who's the GOAT?
Yeah.
Which, by the way, that like when I found out how old you are, I was like, you're in college, so this is such professionally done. Like I was like amazed. Like every episode was so good. Like I generally like if I didn't know, like if I didn't find out like you were a younger person, I would think that this is like a production by like an ESPN or like a professional like media outlet. And I was just like, and not to say you obviously not just, and I don't mean this as a disrespect to you at all.
No, thank you. I appreciate it.
As a high compliment. That was like, man, that was so well done. I would recommend anyone. I know Bulls fans will get upset about the GOAT conversation because, between LeBron and MJ, it's like people get really hyped up in Chicago about the GOAT conversation. But I definitely recommend checking that podcast. But yeah, man, your work speaks for itself. You're a really great writer. Your eye for the game is special too, and I appreciate you joining us for sure. Ed, any final thoughts for you as we wrap up?
Yeah, just piling on, man. Thank you so much to Matt for joining us. This was a really great conversation. Definitely encourage our listeners to check out your work. You're working really hard, man, and love following you on Twitter. So once again, man, this was really fun talking to you about Bulls basketball, man.
Awesome. So yeah, that's a wrap for today's show. If you've missed any previous episodes, you can find us under the Barroom Network on all major and minor podcast platforms. Thank you again to Matt Issa for joining us and to the listeners for tuning in. As always, for Edward Schuler and myself, till next time, Bulls fans,